Welcome to In Focus. I'm Pastor Mike at La Center Church. In our studies in Acts last week, we witnessed Philip obeying God's directive to leave his successful and prosperous and productive ministry in the city of Samaria and take a week-long journey to a desert road. On the surface, it did not make sense. But looking at the bigger picture, it was part of God's plan to plant the seeds of the gospel all over the world. This time, the seed would be taken to Ethiopia by a God-fearing eunuch who trusted Christ because of Philip's witness. This week, we turn to the story of how God got Saul's attention and commanded Ananias to go where Saul was lodging and pray for his healing. This too makes no sense. And why doesn't it make any sense? Well, for 3 years, Paul had led a campaign to stomp out the church in Jerusalem. This persecution became so intense that they went house to house, arresting men and women and imprisoning them. They pushed this campaign outside of Jerusalem as well to the surrounding areas, and now Saul was heading to the nation of Syria to bind and bring back Christ followers to Jerusalem to be put on trial. I can imagine Ananias thinking, if Saul has lost his sight, so much the better. It serves him right. Why not just let him die? But God had other plans. He said to Ananias, Saul is my chosen instrument to carry my name before the Gentiles and the kings and the children of Israel. So Ananias obeyed the Lord. He went to the house where Saul was, and he laid his hands upon Saul, and he prayed for him that he could regain his sight. And Saul was healed. So how do we obey God when it's uncomfortable, when it is difficult, when it doesn't make any sense to us? How and where do we get the courage to obey? So that takes us back again to the story in Acts chapter 9. And what do we learn from this story? First of all, I think it's okay in prayer to share your concerns with God. Why? Because He can take it. So we share our concerns with God. We throw out our frustrations or whatever it is. We lay it before God and we say, this is my concern, God. I don't understand why you're asking me to do this. It doesn't make sense in my circumstance or what I think. And so we bring it before God. And that reminds me of what David wrote in Psalm 55, verse 16. He said there, evening, morning, and at noon, I will utter my complaint and moan, and He hears my voice. Now he concluded that psalm with, cast your burdens upon the Lord, and He will sustain you. So what I gain from that is the power to obey isn't our own, but it comes from God. And I believe that Ananias learned that. He began to question, why would you send me to Saul? I've heard of all the things that he has done. And God says, no, he's my instrument. He's my chosen instrument. I have chosen him to take the gospel to the world. And so after prayer and submitting to God, Ananias stepped out in faith. He did that. He went up, he went to the house, he got up, he went to the house, he prayed for Saul, and then he let God do his work. And as I was thinking about this, and what for me is uncomfortable to do of the things that God asked me to do, I think one of the things that's uncomfortable is the process of confrontation. I don't enjoy that. That is not fun. And I ask myself, why do I resist or avoid confrontation? Well, first of all, I really don't like conflict. I don't like it when people are uncomfortable with one another, or there's fighting going on, or there's broken relationships. I will avoid conflict because of that. But I've learned when an issue goes unconfronted, it becomes like a cancer. So an experience I had in that whole area is when I was an interim pastor in Spokane. There was a good deal of bad blood within the church because of the conflict that had broken out. And one of the older leaders in the church came into my office one day and he says, "Pastor, you got to deal with this." And I looked him in the eye and I said, "I will." So even though it was uncomfortable, I began to meet those who were in the midst of what had happened. So I started to reach out to those that were kind of the catalyst of all that took place. I learned about the stories and I started talking with them. We started having small gatherings of people that were parts of these issues. And there was a good deal of forgivenesses going on, a lot of talking and communication. And the highlight of this process was an evening that we had as the whole church, where we devoted it to unwrap all that had gone on and then put it all on the table and then together commit ourselves to live out forgiveness and grace that we find in Christ. This was an amazing night. There were so many hugs and so much reconciliation taking place. I could have never imagined that. And it was the beginning of a great deal of healing within the church. So that was not fun. It wasn't comfortable, but God blessed it because I stepped out in faith and was obedient to what God asked me to do. So I want to ask you today, what has God placed on your heart? What is He asking you to do that's uncomfortable? First of all, pray about it. Share your feelings with God. Just throw it all on the table and then realize that the power to obey isn't your own, but it's from God. And so then you step out by faith in obedience, and then you watch God do the work, because He is the one that will do the work if you step out in faith, if you do what He asks you to do. So thanks today for watching. Hope you can join us this Sunday in person if possible. If not, join us online at our live stream at 10:30 on Sunday morning. Again, this is Pastor Mike at La Center Church, and this is In Focus.